and Musay will not be in attendance. Okay. I'll start with Atlas Ingebrigtsen, Chambliss,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Lee,
Here.
Lilligren,
Here.
Lindstrom,
Here.
Vento,
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a quorum, and we can continue on with the agenda. And we have a fairly short agenda today, council members, and I'm going to ask, we just have sort of a technical issue, and I'm going to ask that we slightly rearrange the items. And so I would propose that we take item 2 and drop it to the foot of the agenda as the new item 4. And so we'd have a new item 2 and a new item 3. And that is because the comment period for the Livable Communities Act Affordable and Life Cycle Housing Goals is still open until 5 o'clock today. And so the intent would be to take care of the other business first and move what is now item 2 to the foot of the agenda as item 4. Is that clear to folks? Any questions on that? Yeah, cool. So with that, if there's no objections to that change, and with that change, I would propose that we accept our agenda and move on to the approval of the minutes of the December 21st, 2020 regular meeting of the Community Development Committee. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
I'll second. Johnson.
Thank you, council members. Any discussions, additions, corrections? Hearing no discussion, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen, Chambliss, Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That item is adopted, and we will move into our first business item, which is item 2020-332. It's the Legacy Regional Parks Bonding Program and Pass-Through Agreement Signature Authorization. And it's a signature authorization. Do we need a report on this, Director Barajas?
Sorry, Chair Lilligren. Yes, I believe Nicole will have a report for you. I'm just checking on it.
Great.
Heather Giesel, are you available to pinch hit if Nicole is not available?
This is Nicole. I'm here. I have a script to read to you guys.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Nicole, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and committee members, as stated, my name is Nicole Clapp, and I'm the Senior Grants Administrator for Regional Parks and Community Development. So the Community Development Finance and Administration Unit, on behalf of Regional Parks, is requesting that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Community Development Director to execute grant agreements to pass through state funds from numerous fund sources. These include state fiscal year 2020 and 2021 Parks and Trails Legacy Funds, state fiscal year 2021 Regional Park Bonding Program Funds, and state fiscal year 2021 Legislatively Directive Pass-Through Funds. Agreements will go to park implementing agencies according to the legacy formula, which is defined in Minnesota statute, section 85.53. and the bonding formula, which is defined in the Regional Parks Policy Plan. Pass-through agreements will go to legislatively named recipients in amounts defined by the legislature. Funding for the Parks and Trails Fund and the Regional Park Bonding Program is provided at a 100% state share with no local match required, and will be used to fund projects approved by the elected representatives of each of the metropolitan parks implementing agencies to support parks and trails that are part of the regional park system. State pass-through grants are provided at a 100% state share with local match if required, defined in the appropriation itself, and will be used to fund projects defined by the legislature. So in the past, signature authority was requested based on a list of specific projects and dollar amounts for grants over $250,000. If agency governing bodies opted to add projects that were not on the original list, or if they increased the budget of existing projects over the authorization threshold, a new signature authorization was required. The additional authorizations decrease the efficiency in grant administration. So changes to the signature authorization process do not impact project review and approval steps that are completed before an agreement moves forward for execution. In addition, all of the funding associated with this business item has been approved by the council in 3 different business items. So August 14th, 2019, the FY20 legacy funds were brought in through a budget amendment. July 22nd, 2020, another budget amendment brought in the FY21 legacy funds. And finally, on November 18th of this past year now, a budget amendment brought in the FY21 bonding and pass-through funds. And at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Any questions on that report? Questions from committee members? Seeing none, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
Vento moves approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. That is before us. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. That item is adopted, and we will move on to our new business item number 2, which is item 321-4. That's the 2020 Livable Communities Act Local Housing Incentives Account funding recommendations. And I'll recognize Ms. Beard to introduce our presenter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I asked the chair to give me a moment to introduce Ashley. A lot of you have met her, but some of you may have not, and this is her first presentation to the Community Development Committee. Ashley joined us in May, coming from the state of Michigan with degrees in economics and urban planning from the University of Michigan and work experience at the City of Detroit, as well as the nonprofit Poverty Solutions based in Ann Arbor. She has been an incredibly resilient and adaptive team member to join us in such a crazy year. I've literally met Ashley in person once since she got here in May, and yet she feels so much like a part of the team and the LCA family, and a lot of that is because of just her wonderful attitude and approach toward work. She even went so far as to win Rookie of the Year in our Community Development Community Appreciation Awards, which I'm super proud of. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to present to you our recommendations for local housing incentives account for 2020. Thanks.
Great. Ashley, well, welcome.
Thank you. So I'll jump right in. So I'm Ashley. I'm delighted to work on the Livable Communities team. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. And manage the LHIA or Local Housing Incentives Account. So LHIA exists to develop and preserve affordable housing, and that includes multifamily and single family housing and rental and ownership housing. So today I'd like to share with the committee these 2020 funding recommendations. Next slide. So For this year, we are recommending 6 multifamily rental projects and 5 single-family ownership projects with $5.5 million in LHIA grants. So 2020 was an unprecedented year in terms of LHIA funding. In 2019, this account was funded with $2.5 million, and it's typical for this account to be funded previously to 2019 with about $1.5 million. And we have a breakdown of specific projects and dollar amounts in a later slide. Next slide, please. So first, I'd like to cover what our process is like, how projects are selected and funded. Next slide, please. So here we have a diagram to illustrate LHIA's application process. So similar to other LCA grant programs, there is, you can see on the left, an RFP process. In the middle, projects are evaluated and ranked. And then on the right, you can see that projects are selected and funded. However, for LHIA, we don't manage much of this process in-house, especially the RFP process. So we fund some of the applications that are submitted to Minnesota Housing through their consolidated RFP process. And there's a selection committee that evaluates and ranks or rates applications, and they consider a proposer's capacity to deliver the project, if the project is financially feasible, and check them against funder priorities. And we are one of those funders, so that includes our program priorities for LHIA. And as a reminder or to inform everyone, LHIA's priorities are projects that provide rental housing for individuals with incomes at or below 30% AMI, proposals that serve large families by providing 2 or more bedroom units, and proposals serving people experiencing long-term homelessness. So LHIA provides gap funding primarily for these projects for hard costs. And again, we work with Minnesota Housing to identify those projects that align with the priorities that I just named. Next slide, please. So I'd like to add that not all applications that request LHIA funding receive LHIA funding. And if a proposer wants to be considered, they can opt in by submitting a form in Minnesota Housing's application process. And even those that opt in don't necessarily receive the funding. It may not be the right match. There might be another funding source that would better suit their needs. Next slide, please. So this is our timeline thus far, beginning with the NOFA or Notice of Funding Availability in March. And with the pandemic, and here we are in January, but with the pandemic, the application due date was in July, and subsequently all that followed got pushed back about a month. So I believe we typically have bring this before the committee and council in December. Next slide, please. So let's jump into the funding recommendations. I really enjoyed reviewing these projects this year. So for the next couple of slides, we'll take a peek at this round's projects in the 7-county metro for all Minnesota Housing Awards and zero in on those projects that have LHIA funding. Next slide, please. So these are the awarded multifamily projects for the 7-county metro. So these are all multifamily projects in our region that was awarded funds through Minnesota Housing's process. So starting on the left, we have the project names, their respective cities, and then in the middle, we have the new affordable units to be created and the units to be preserved and the total funding award for this round. Those that are highlighted and italicized are those with proposed LHIA funds. So we are proposing to support half or 6 out of 12 of these projects. And we'll look at a table of all of our funded projects, these with the single family in a few slides. Next slide, please. So these are part of the single family recommendations. These are the single family recommendations that was awarded within the Twin Cities, so either Minneapolis or St. Paul. And we are proposing to fund 2 of these projects. One is in Minneapolis and one is in St. Paul. Next slide, please. These are the single family projects that are in the suburbs within our region. And we are proposing to fund 3 of these. One is in Chaska, one project is in Chaska, and the other 2 you see in green at the bottom are scatter site projects in West Hennepin, or in suburban Hennepin County and in Washington County. Next slide, please. And here is the overview of our LHIA funding recommendation. So those highlighted projects in the last few slides. So you can see the project names on the left, and then the city or the applicant in the middle, and what we are proposing to fund for each of the projects. And the multifamily projects are at the top, ownership is at the bottom, and the rental projects, the multifamily rental projects are in the cities of Oakdale, Maple Grove, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Woodbury, and Chaska. And the single family ownership projects, we have 2 scatter site projects that I mentioned before in Washington and suburban Hennepin County. And the final 3 are in St. Paul, Chaska, and Minneapolis. So we had less applications for single family funding than we usually have this round. So we funded everyone that opted in for LHIA money this year. We usually have a few more. So you can see the total for our rental is just over 5 million, and the ownership total is just under 500,000. So you see the summary here, and on the next few slides, we'll go through these projects that are listed one by one so you can truly get a feel for them. Next slide, please. So here I'd like to remind us all of LHIA's priorities. So rental housing for people at incomes at or below 30% AMI, that's about $31K a year. Proposals that serve families or larger families by providing 2 or more bedroom units, and proposals serving people experiencing long-term homelessness. And the first one is Bethesda Oakdale that we're recommending at $750,000. It is a new construction mixed income project with 2 distinct parts. One part is a 15 unit market rate part, and the other part is the remaining 50 units affordable at or below 30 to 60 AMI. And this project will serve high priority homeless individuals and people with disabilities. And the units are 1 to 3 bedroom units. So that checks all of the boxes, so to speak, for our priorities this year. And that's how we consider every project moving forward. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chair, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Thank you. Could you let us know as you go through each of these, if it's convenient and if you have it available, what the requested amount was? If you don't, that's okay. I typically like to just know, I know these are all oversubscribed programs, and I just love to, understand, what the need is as we just continue to, support projects like this. It's just always something I find helpful as I talk about housing. But if it's not available now, that's okay too.
Yeah, I don't have it available. Based on my memory though, most of the multifamily projects were funded up to what they requested for. The single family projects, however, some were partially funded and some were not funded at all. Oh, actually, I do know that. Botno Ridge, which is one of the projects, and Botno and Settlers Ridge, 2 of the multifamily projects actually were not funded this year. And then on the single family side, what was requested was actually provided for. So pretty much it was 2 out of these 11 projects this year that were not funded by Minnesota Housing, but we chose to fund them. And I'll highlight them when they come up and where they are. Tara, Tara's here to jump in just in case I overlooked something. I don't know if Tara had any.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson,
Yep.
you're Ashley, you had it exactly right. Generally speaking, projects that get funded are made whole. Sometimes we decide to fund projects with the LHA portion of the request when Minnesota Housing is not funding their portion of the request, and there's usually a good reason for that. And I think Ashley will get into those and those individual
WebEx
projects.
Assistant is enabled to save audio highlights.
All right. So the next project is Botno Ridge. So this is one of the ones that Minnesota Housing decided not to fund this year in Maple Grove. Botno will be a newly constructed building. It has 2 previous phases. So Botno phases 1 and 2. And this phase will provide supportive services and have units for those transitioning from homelessness to permanent housing. It'll also have units for people with disabilities and families experiencing homelessness, currently experiencing homelessness. So it's a 50-unit development, and it's affordable at or below 30 to 50% AMI. And the units are 1 to 4 bedroom units. So that's really exciting to see, not just 3 bedroom units, but 4 bedroom units. That seems to be extremely unique. Next slide, please. Oh, next, thank you. So this project, Emma Norton, is in St. Paul, and we're recommending this to be funded at almost $2 million. It's the highest amount of any project that we're recommending to be funded. And it is a newly proposed development with 60 units of supportive housing. It serves homeless women, and those women can have 1 child. It serves women with disabilities and those with histories of chemical dependence or mental health challenges. All of these units will be affordable at or below 30% of AMI. And the efficiency units are being targeted for single individual women, and the 1 bedrooms are for women with a child. Next slide, please. Next, there's Fire Station 1, and this is a really cool rehab or adaptive reuse project. The recommended amount is a little over $1 million, and Fire Station 1 will be a new 90-unit or a rehab / new 90-unit building, affordable at or below 50 to 60% AMI, and it'll serve high priority homeless individuals and will accept housing vouchers. Most of the units will be efficiency to 2 bedroom units. And that's in Minneapolis. Next slide, please. So this is Settlers Ridge, another project that Minnesota Housing decided not to fund this year. It's in Woodbury, but we suggested, or we're recommending it be funded at $250,000. It's a new construction project with 84 units, affordable at or below 50% AMI, with 1 to 3 bedrooms. And Settlers Ridge also applied for LCDA funds, and I believe wasn't selected to move forward. But we think that it is a really good housing project in an area of the region that could use more affordable housing. So we were moving to recommend funding for this project.
Chair Lilligren, I have a question. Councilmember Chambliss. Okay, I saw your lips moving. I assume that means it's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, please do. Yeah, thank
okay.
you,
So do you know how much funding Settlers Ridge had requested, or how much they need, and if and how they plan to fill the gap in funding?
I think I need to punt that to Tara. She knew a little bit more about the history of Settlers Ridge than I.
Ms. Beard.
Oh, through the
Mr.
chair.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Chambliss, that's a great question, and we definitely don't kind of just arbitrarily award the LHA portion of a request if Minnesota Housing isn't funding it. So we did have conversations with City of Woodbury staff to talk about the long-term solvency of the project if it did not receive funding from Minnesota Housing. And we're reassured from them that there are very strong indications that the city will support a TIF district. There's also a chance that the project will come back for LCDA funds next year. As you recall, in some of our scoring criteria conversations, a huge reason why the Settlers Ridge did not score highly in 2020 was due to a lack of points in innovation and demonstration value. And so the restructured scoring criteria for 2021 may make Settlers Ridge more competitive this year than it would have been in 2020. And it is a common bond project for what it's worth. So it is an experienced affordable housing developer as well. And we're hoping that recommending this funding will allow the project to stay alive long enough to become fully funded. It is very rare to have a this deeply affordable of a project in a single family neighborhood of Woodbury, where there are a lot of retail jobs and not a lot of multifamily affordable housing. So it was a really important project to us to try to find a way to continue to support. But I hope that answers your question. Thanks.
Councilmember Chambliss?
Yeah, having trouble with my mute. Yeah, that did answer my question. I'm really excited about this opportunity and the openness of Woodbury to fund this new affordable housing construction.
Agree. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Tara had asked me a question, and I actually responded in the chat to everyone. So I was looking deeper into Botno Ridge, and I see that they received interim loan funds from Minnesota Housing, but for some reason throughout the board report, throughout Minnesota Housing's board report, it states that they didn't fund either one. So I think it may be a confusing point on my end when I'm interpreting Minnesota Housing's board report, but I'll definitely ask more questions and circle back on Botno Ridge, or Botno Phase 3. So next slide, please. West Creek Apartments. This one really just brightens up my day. So in November of last year, the council amended our 2020 fund distribution plan to include an additional $1 million, and it allowed us to include funding for West Creek Apartments. And this is a new 18-unit supportive housing development serving homeless youth and youth with disabilities ages 18 to 29 years old. And all of these units will be affordable at or below 30% AMI and be efficiency units. And this will be the first supportive housing development for youth like this project in Carver County. And this is in Chaska. So this was a really exciting project for me to look over and read, and it seems to meet a need in the region. Next slide, please. So we're crossing into the single family projects. So single family ownership projects. So the first project here is in Washington County. And this proposal, we're recommending it be funded with $90,000 to purchase, rehab, and resell 3-bedroom homes in Washington County that are at affordable at or below 80% AMI. And the proposal indicated that they are targeting buyers with incomes that are between 50 and 70 AMI. And this is the first proposal, or this is the only single family ownership proposal that states that they're targeting that income bracket. All of the rest of the projects that we are funding are affordable at or below 80% AMI, which I think that's a home price of about $293,000. And this is a scattered site project, and these will be community land trust homes, so affordable in perpetuity. That means that the buyers will own the home, but not the land under the home. And then homes are resold and kept affordable within the land trust. Next slide, please. So the next single family project is in St. Paul, recommended at $40K. So this is an acquisition and rehab of a 5-bedroom home with an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, in St. Paul. And ADUs are like granny flats or an additional home on a property. This project will also include independent living assistance for those that temporarily or permanently occupy the home. And it's also affordable at or below 80% AMI. And once again, it's a 5-bedroom home. So this is a really unique project that came through this year. So I was really excited about ADUs. I get excited about granny flats. All right, next slide. This is homes within reach in suburban Hennepin County, recommended at $210K. This proposal is for the acquisition and rehab of 8 community land trust homes across the county. And these homes are proposed to be 3-bedroom homes, affordable at or below 80% AMI. Next slide, please. This is a townhome project in Chaska. So this is a rehab project recommended for $30K for 3 townhome units. And each townhome unit will have 2 bedrooms in them at or below 80% AMI. This project really stuck out for the selection committee because it's a really innovative project that'll cost a lot of money to rehab and preserve. But being near downtown Chaska was something, regardless of the high land costs, the selection committee and Minnesota Housing thought was really important to fund. Next slide, please. So this is our last project for our single family ownership projects, PPL Greenbelt, or Project for Pride in Living Greenbelt project. And we're recommending this be funded for $60,000 for the construction of 5 3-bedroom homes in North Minneapolis. And this is specifically in the Hawthorne Eco Village neighborhood. And these homes will be affordable at or below 80% AMI as well. Next slide, please. So this slide, wrapping up, is the anticipated outcomes of our grant funds. So on the left, we have the amount funded for 2020, which is $5.5 million. And we estimate this to leverage $38 million and $51 million in private and public investment. We're proposing this year to build 360 new affordable housing units, and that breaks down into 352 rental, as you can see, and 8 ownership units, with 12 housing units of ownership housing to be preserved or rehabbed. And then the right column totals our LHIA awards to date, and that does not include the 2020 amounts on the left. But as you can see, over the years, LHIA has been making a big impact. Next slide, please. Well, I feel like LHIA has been making a big impact. So this year, it was a joy to review these projects and work in partnership with Minnesota Housing staff this year, and also to work with my teammates as they helped guide me through this first year of working here and working with LHIA. So in summary, our recommendation for 2020 is that the Met Council award these projects and authorize our Community Development Division Director to execute these grant agreements on behalf of the council. That includes my presentation, and I'm open to answer any questions. And again, Tara is here to jump in and answer any questions that fly over my head.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Johnson, for your report and your enthusiastic work on this, and welcome to the Met Council. And committee members, questions for Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bento. Yeah.
Councilmember Bento.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. I love your enthusiasm and welcome aboard. I think it's pretty impressive that you got the Rookie of the Year right off the bat in the middle of a pandemic. You may need to give us a presentation some night about social skills so that when we get to be back together, we reconnect. as a committee. But I am wondering, and this is kind of in the weeds stuff, and I will certainly understand if you don't have an answer tonight. But I'm wondering for those projects that are rehab, if there are additional funds available elsewhere that help deal with issues like lead paint and asbestos abatement and other kinds of rehabilitation that can become very costly for these types of projects.
Yeah, in conversation. Oh, through the chair. I'm sorry.
Go for it. Go for it.
In conversations and evaluating these projects early and kind of being in some of the conversations with the funding partners outside that try to support preservation projects, it is a challenge for projects to get funding to address those health concerns. But I definitely want to put this to Tara, who's been working a little bit closer with this, because that's pretty much all I know that it's a challenge. I don't really know what's actively happening to address it.
Ms. Beard, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Vento. Yes, there are certainly county level programs, local government level programs that address lead paint abatement, asbestos abatement. Our own TBRA program can pay for some like demolition of, I can't remember, I think it's just asbestos because some of the Dean County programs will fund the lead-based paint, but I might have that backwards. Marcus Martin, of course, would know for sure. So there are absolutely other sources of funding that are more specific to environmental cleanups. I couldn't speak to, if they're sufficient to meet the need or not, but I do know that they exist at other levels of government.
Thanks, Councilmember Bento. Is that it? Okay, cool. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was intrigued by the pieces about the land trust, and I was just wondering, is that a new thing, or is that something that we have usually supported in the past? I think it's really innovative, and I just want to learn more about how we came to that situation. Thank you.
Sure, Ms. Johnson or Ms. Beard.
Yeah, through the chair. Councilmember Lee, can you repeat the first part of your question? I only heard the most of the last part.
Yeah, so the projects we have that are being held within land trust, is that something that is new, or is that something we've done in the past? I'm just really intrigued by it, and I think it's really innovative.
Yeah, so through the chair, the land trust projects, I believe we've been funding for a while. This is something that is, to me, innovative. I'm excited to work in the state of Minnesota because land trusts are not cross the country as popular to me as it is here. But I'll definitely throw this to Tara. I feel like we've been funding land trust projects for a number of years.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lee, absolutely. Homes Within Reach and Three Rivers Community Land Trust are both well established and have been around for quite some time, and we've helped fund Carver County's land trust is newer, but has especially been ramping up. It started in, I think, Chanhassen or Chaska, I should know which, but it started as a local in one of those governments and became a Carver County broader endeavor, which is excitingly being modeled by Scott County to develop a Scott County land trust. So we're seeing expansion of the land trust model throughout the region. There's also the Rondo Community Land Trust, which we have funded in the past and presently, which serves not just St. Paul, but the suburban Ramsey County as well. We haven't been requested funding from the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, which serves the city of Minneapolis, but it is the third largest land trust in the country, which is pretty impressive. And we have funded them in the past. So we have a great history of not just funding, but also supporting growth and development of land trusts in the region and hope to continue to do so.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Further questions or comments on the report? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Council Member. This is a great presentation. And I liked the comparison of awards that we've had for 2020 as compared to total LHIA awards on page 23. I'd be interested in looking at a little bit more depth in the trend to see what the awards were in a prior year and potentially over the last several years, or whatever would signify a trend. So that's just some feedback for the future. I think that would be very interesting to see how we're doing.
Great. Thank you. Further comments or questions on the report? I'm not hearing any. I do have a question. I don't know if this is for Ms. Johnson or Ms. Beard, but it's really impressive to see how many of the multi-unit projects that we're awarding funds to are serving high priority homeless individuals or other difficult to keep housed types of individuals. And so I'm just wondering, it's really rewarding to see that. And I'm wondering if within our scoring, if you can comment that within our scoring or maybe the scoring of Minnesota Housing, how the ability to provide services, to have service providers as part of their teams relates to their scoring, because in general, these sometimes difficult to house individuals do require a lot more sort of wraparound services. So I'm just wondering if you have a comment about that, please.
Yes, Chair. So this year, I got the opportunity to participate in LCDA scoring and LCDA TOD scoring, and to look at how they consider special populations or populations, people with disabilities, or those with any projects that offer supportive housing. So a lot of times when we're reviewing projects, we want to know more about supportive housing, what supports are actually being provided, what's listed in the application, and pull those out and then compare across projects, specifically when I was scoring the LCDA projects. So this year I had the opportunity to do a similar thing for those projects that opted in for LHIA funding, pull out and compare. Some projects said that they will provide independent living assistance, right, for the single family homes, or they provide some sort of support for individuals with intellectual disabilities, specifically in half of the building. So these are things that we are increasingly considering and trying to develop more knowledge on our team in terms of what it means for one development to provide a certain level of services versus another development. And I think that that's something in our year of exploration that I've heard a lot, Tara talk about a lot. So I don't know if Tara, if you want to jump in about how we're looking at supportive services potentially moving forward.
Mr. Chair.
Anything to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ashley, too. I will just use this to make my soapbox plug that I really feel strongly when we create affordable housing at 30% AMI and with wraparound social services, perhaps not exactly always when we're serving someone experiencing homelessness, but in a lot of cases, we're actually making an affordable unit available and therefore freeing up another unit that's affordable, but maybe not affordable with services, or is affordable, but at 50% or 60% AMI. And so I think 30% AMI and below units, deeply affordable with supportive services, really should count as more than a unit, in my opinion, in terms of kind of addressing the housing shortage that we have. And so I'll throw that soapbox point out there and just say that, yes, we continue to want to, and I think this aligns also with Councilmember Chambliss's comment earlier, that we really want to do a better job of measuring our impact and using that to really have data-driven, informed kind of scoring criteria and funding recommendations, and we want to continue to improve that moving forward.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions or comments on the report? Otherwise, staff has made a recommendation that we award 6 multifamily and 5 single-family local housing incentives account grants totaling $5.5 million, and that we authorize our community development division director to execute the grant agreement on our behalf. And I would entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Chambliss.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Vento seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember Vento. It's always exciting to award grants to projects like this. Any further discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we will move on the agenda to our new number 3, which is 2021-5. That's the project-based voucher award recommendations. And Ms. Smith is here to give us a presentation on this item. Ms. Smith, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to you all. Here this evening, I'm Terry Smith. I'm the Director of the Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and here to recommend some projects for project-based vouchers. Next slide, please. So this is sort of a review slide to reground us and what project-based vouchers are and sort of set the premise for tonight's presentation. As you recall, the Housing Choice Voucher Program currently has 6,859 vouchers connected to it. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development allows housing authorities discretion to project base up to 20% of those vouchers in either new construction or existing housing developments. The current council approval includes up to 20%. So the council has approved us to project base up to 20% of our vouchers. Currently today, we have about 88% of our vouchers that are tenant-based, and we have about 12% that are project-based. And the currently awarded 845 project-based vouchers have been awarded in 48 different projects throughout 30 communities in the region. And that does not include yet tonight's voucher awards. At the right is just kind of regrounding us and what the Metro HRA service area is for the voucher program, and we serve the areas in yellow. Next slide, please. So just a little chart to show the difference between tenant-based and project-based, and this is likely review for most of you. But under the tenant-based voucher program, the voucher is actually tied to the tenant. So the tenant moves from place to place, unit to unit, city to city, really anywhere they want to go in the country that has a voucher program. The tenant pays 30% of their income towards rent and utilities. I have that the tenant has locational choice because the tenant is responsible to find a unit on the open rental market and find a landlord that's willing to accept a voucher. And in these market conditions, that can be somewhat of a challenge, actually finding a unit where a landlord's willing to participate. The tenant-based voucher openings are filled with HRA waiting list applicants, and there is some concentration of voucher holders under the tenant-based program in lower rent areas of the region. You will recall our recent conversations about adopting small area fair market rents, and we're hoping that that will lead to allowing tenants to move into higher rent areas and not have concentrations in lower rent areas of the region. Under the project-based voucher side, the rental assistance become attached to the unit. So a tenant moves into a unit, as long as they're living in that unit, they receive voucher assistance. When they move out, a new low-income family moves in and receives rental assistance. Again, tenants pay about 30% of their income towards rent and utilities. I have the locational choice is limited because a tenant is essentially offered a project-based voucher unit that's vacant at the time, so they don't have a lot of choice in terms of where they live with the project-based voucher assistance. Landlords that are requesting project-based vouchers are already committed to the program and to participation. And unit openings to fill project-based units are either marketed to families on the Metro HRA waiting list or filled through referral from coordinated entry and service providers. So units that are occupied by tenants that have meet specialized populations such as those experiencing homelessness, people living with disabilities, are filled with direct referrals from service providers and coordinated entry. And then, project-based vouchers, awarding them in developments ensure that permanent affordable housing units are available in good neighborhoods. And we have some, you all have some discretion in where those are awarded. Next slide, please. You will see some themes here from Ashley's presentation to the projects that I'm recommending tonight for project-based vouchers. And the Metro HRA issued a request for proposals to offer and award 200 project-based vouchers back in May of 2020, and proposals were due in June of 2020. Historically, the Metro HRA has offered and awarded project-based vouchers through the Minnesota Housing's consolidated RFP process, the same way LHIA funds are awarded in a number of other financing tools for affordable housing developers. You may recall an item that came before you and the full council back on May 13th, where I was requesting approval to issue an RFP independently of Minnesota Housing's process to ensure that we could prioritize the proposal selection process through the Metro HRA instead of relying solely on Minnesota Housing to score the applications, and particularly as it relates to existing housing. So awarding opportunities for existing housing where there isn't a need for additional financing tools. As part of the RFP process, we received 24 applications for 24 different projects that requested a total of 321 PBV units. So substantially oversubscribed in terms of request and award. And the proposals were ranked using the below selection criteria shown on this slide that was approved by you all back in May. Really owner experience, extent to which projects further the goal of deconcentrating poverty, to promote projects located outside of areas of concentrated poverty, unless the project is preserving an existing subsidy, to increase the supply and availability of affordable housing from a broad standpoint, to integrate housing and tenant services for special needs tenants, and to promote service partnerships that link supportive services with housing. And this is sort of getting at the question that Councilmember Chambliss, I believe, was asking, but we switched these possible points this year. And so the highest scoring points were awarded to supportive service projects. And you'll see the ones that made it through the entire process all are serving some sort of specialized population and have supportive service connections to really help families achieve housing stability. We gave some points for larger projects for families that need 3 or more bedrooms. We considered the extent to which the projects link housing, jobs, and transportation, and then the extent of community support within the project. Next slide, please. So the RFP outlined additional provisions because although we were issuing the RFP outside of Minnesota Housing's consolidated RFP process, we still wanted to do some coordination. And it's important that we're committing project-based voucher resources to projects that are to become financially feasible. So we don't want to award project-based vouchers to projects that aren't going to come to fruition and essentially have the vouchers, sitting on a shelf somewhere waiting for a project to get fully funded. So we included language in the RFP that required new construction projects to receive full funding in 2020 in order to get the formal award of the project-based vouchers. So there were 13 projects that out of the 24 that submitted applications, and after the scoring was done by Metro HRA staff, 13 projects received letters of intent for 196 project-based vouchers prior to Minnesota Housing's application deadline for the consolidated RFP. And those projects received a letter of intent that essentially stated, if you receive all of your funding, the Metro HRA will formally commit project-based vouchers to your project. In these letters of intent, Then the developers and owners went into Minnesota Housing's process and application process and were awarded additional points for committing to serve and accept project-based vouchers on those projects. So we initially received 24 applications. 13 of them received letters of intent from us saying, if you get funded, we'll give you the vouchers, formally in the action that I'm reviewing today. And of those 13 projects, 6 received full funding to move forward. So today I'm recommending 81 project-based vouchers, 4 in new construction developments and 2 in existing housing developments. Next slide, please. So this is a chart that shows all of the projects that I'm recommending today for funding. One is Beyond New Beginnings in Chaska, and that's 4 units. I'll go through each one of these in future slides as well. Carver County School District Partnership, which is a really cool partnership with the school districts for 5 project-based vouchers. Cranberry Ridge in Plymouth for 10. Edison 2 in Roseville for 4. Trails Edge South in Waconia for 8 project-based vouchers, and then Vista 44 in Hopkins, recommending 50 project-based vouchers for that project today. You note there's one project on this list, Cranberry Ridge in Plymouth, is outside of the Metro HRA normal operating service area, so that project will require a joint powers agreement with the Plymouth HRA in order for us to administer vouchers there. Next slide, please. So the first project I'm recommending today is called Beyond New Beginnings and is in Chaska. This is a Carver County Community Development Agency. They own a building in Chaska that has housing units in it, 2-bedroom units, and a retail space that the CDA is going to convert for, and the space will be used for resident programming. New Beginnings is an academic program for pregnant and parenting teens under age 21 that have not yet received their high school diploma. So the on-site services will help residents with implementing a parenting plan, have intensive on-site services to help them acquire independent living skills for housing stability moving forward. That request is 4 project-based voucher units. Next slide, please. The next one is also a Carver County CDA-owned project. They own 5 scattered sites throughout Chaska, Norwood, Young America, and Waconia. They're recommending 5 project-based units here for existing housing, and these are 2- and 3-bedroom units. The CDA has an existing partnership with Carver County school districts to provide housing and services for students and their families experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And the Metro HRA has awarded in the past 3 project-based vouchers to this partnership, and it's expanding now to 5. It's been very successful over the last 2 years, so we're excited to award some more project-based vouchers to this project. The CDA is a HUD certified housing counseling agency. They also employ a resident services coordinator that will provide intense services to the families of these units and resource connections, really with the goal of stabilizing families. Next slide, please. Cranberry Ridge is a project we've been hearing about for years, and I'm excited that this one is going through this year, but this is a project, new construction, that's owned by Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. It will be 45 units of housing containing 1, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units. Ashley indicated a project where LHIA funding is being recommended with 4 bedrooms. So we've seen a couple of these this year, so that's pretty cool. 5 project-based voucher units here will serve broader low-income populations. The project also contains 10 units for persons experiencing homelessness and 5 units for people in households living with disabilities. On-site services and community programming will be provided by the Interfaith Outreach and Community Partners, again linking housing with supportive services to promote success. This project contains Minnesota housing tax credits that were awarded last year. Plymouth HRA has also awarded 10 project-based vouchers to this project. And because of the limited number of vouchers they have, there was a collaboration with Beacon and Plymouth HRA for the Metro HRA to award 5 more vouchers to this project. Next slide, please. Edison 2 is a project in Roseville. Sand Company is the owner of this new construction project. This development will contain 59 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. They requested 4 project-based voucher units that will again serve broader low-income households. But the project goal is to meet housing needs generated by the increase in people moving to the area for jobs, both new employers and expanding employers in the close proximity of Roseville to the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul job centers. 10 units will contain housing supports for households experiencing homelessness and living with disabilities. On-site services will be provided by Simpson Housing. This project also contains Minnesota housing tax credits. In this project, Edison 1 received a TBRA award back in 2019, so tax-based revitalization account, and a local livable communities demonstration account funds in 2017. So I'm excited to see mutually supported projects receive recommended project-based vouchers. Next slide, please. The last project I'm recommending today is Vista 44. This is a creative partnership, again, where there are some deep services connected with this project. It's a new construction project through Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative again. The project contains 50 units, and they're requesting 50 project-based vouchers for all units there, which are 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. 25 of the units will serve people experiencing homelessness. 8 will serve people living with disabilities. And the remaining 33 will be supportive housing units for other populations that need supportive services. Volunteers of America are the service provider that will provide the on-site intensive services. And really the project is intended to be the first step in helping families build pathways to stability and prosperity. This project was awarded Minnesota Housing Infrastructure bonds and potentially 4% tax credits, and received a recommendation of $1.5 million in LCDA funds, and then also a recommendation of TBRA funds, so other council support. This project was sort of the cornerstone of this year's Minnesota RFP process, so it was really a highlighted project because of the intensive service component. So I'm excited to see this project being recommended for vouchers. Next slide, please. So if you approve this tonight, Councilmember Chambliss, do you have a question?
Yeah, yes, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, please, Councilmember. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see.
I think I missed seeing Trails Edge in the presentation. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, Councilmember Chambliss, Trails, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Chambliss, Trails Edge, let me see, just looking at my spreadsheet, Trails Edge is not being recommended for funding because they did not get their tax credits. So they are not being awarded all the funding necessary to move forward in this year's funding process. So we're not recommending them tonight for project-based vouchers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Let's see. Back to my other screen. So the process today is to enter, the next steps would be to enter into an agreement to enter into a housing assistance payment contract for the new construction developments that commits the project-based vouchers during the construction period. Once construction is complete and the units pass inspection to ensure that all health and safety requirements are met, we would enter into a housing contract to start making rental payments on behalf of the low-income families in the units. Projects that are being requested and awarded for existing housing would move right to the step of a housing contract to help to begin paying rent on behalf of low-income families. Next slide, please. Oh, Trails Edge South. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Didn't have that one in the presentation, Councilmember Chambliss. I apologize. Trails Edge South is a new construction development in Waconia. That is a 60-unit building with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The project will contain 8 housing support units, 4 serving families experiencing long-term homelessness, and 4 serving families living with disabilities. The requested 8 PBVs will serve broader low-income families in partnership. And the Community Action Partnership will provide permanent supportive housing for the residents of Trails Edge South. I was getting this one mixed up with Settlers Ridge and Woodbury, which we didn't fund, so I apologize for that, Councilmember Chambliss. Settlers Ridge and Woodbury did request project-based vouchers, and we're not recommending them because they did not receive the necessary funding to move forward. And the recommendation before you today, Mr. Chair, is that the council approve the award of 81 project-based vouchers in the projects shown on this screen. And I'm happy to answer additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, for your work and for your report. And I'll ask committee members in a moment. One question I would have, Terry, is just since we did it differently this year with the independent RFP process and with some deliberate coordination with Minnesota Housing's process, I'm wondering if you just had any comments on how that went.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. It's a question we've been toying with for years, and developers have been asking us to do that because it helps them get the other necessary financing that they need, like the tax credits. And so I think it worked well from that standpoint. I think it worked well because we were able to award some existing projects, some project-based vouchers, and working through the Minnesota housing process. They don't have as much paperwork to fill out to apply for vouchers. So I think from that standpoint, it helped. And then I think we, the council, or you all as policymakers, have more opportunity to fund projects that you are interested in as policymakers instead of relying solely on Minnesota Housing's policy priorities.
Great, thank you, very helpful. Committee members, other questions on this report? Yeah, Councilmember Bento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry, I just love when you come with these recommendations, and I'm particularly intrigued by the Chaska, Carver County, and Vista 44 proposals. And as agendas allow in the future, I'd appreciate any kind of updates about how the supportive programming with those housing projects work. And in particular, it'd be interesting to sometime hear from service providers as well as the residents about the value of the programs and the successes that they're meeting. I just am so impressed, and particularly with the school-related projects. It's phenomenal. So thank you.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Vento, we'd be happy to. And we have, some similar projects that have been in occupancy for several years that we could bring an information item, maybe in the first quarter of 2021 to provide some information on how those service connections really, really help families obtain housing stability and succeed and do goal setting for, self-sufficiency as well moving forward.
Thank you. Further questions or comments on that report?
Mr. Chair, Johnson?
Yeah, please. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Terry. I really appreciate this. So of the 81 that we're awarding today, how many projects was it again? I lost my screen here. I have my report up. Were there 8?
6 projects.
Oh, 6, okay. But 24 applied. So are any of those still in the mix for future? Or are they now just set aside and you would have to come in and start all over again? How does that work if they, I guess, didn't have their ducks in a row for the points system that we have in place? How does that work?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, I think if there was a downside, like really good projects, like I think Settlers Ridge and Woodbury is one that we would have liked to have seen funded just because it has some cooperative partnerships and for all the reason Ashley indicated in her presentation. But the developers that did not get projects-based vouchers this round will have to reapply when we offer them again. And the reason we did that is because new construction projects, we're committing the vouchers now and the projects won't be online till 2022 or sometime thereafter. And if projects don't have the necessary financing, it would be 2023, 2024. Like Cranberry Ridge, I think, was 4 years into the Minnesota housing process before they got the tax credits. So the idea is we don't really want to put vouchers on the shelf for that far down the line. But I think it's definitely something, that we need to think about and, working in partnership with Tara and her team, just talking through, doing sort of a plus delta of our process this year. What worked well, what didn't, what do we want to tweak in the future? How do we want to offer and award project-based vouchers in the future? It's a really good question.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Chair, may I ask one more quick question? And I mean, I'm champion of stating the obvious on a lot of days. I get it. But I mean, it's still overwhelming when you look at the numbers that the requests were for 321 project-based vouchers scattered throughout this region. And, we all know too, speaking of Cranberry Ridge, it's in my district, and I worked really hard on that as a council member. In fact, I remember guiding and zoning it when I was mayor back in the day for the, maybe something could happen in that area generally. And I mean, it's like, and these projects end up on life support a lot of times. And, I think also when we are thinking, switching gears a bit and trying to think about the goals and the need and how do we encourage communities to, move forward projects like this. I mean, that's all good and great, but there is a pipeline of a lot of projects throughout this region that just takes so much time to get past the finish line. And I sometimes, not all communities have the same resources and are paced at the same ability as others. So it comes in different ways all over this region. But, if we could have the money, I think the will is there and the projects are trying to come online. So there's this bottleneck that we all know about. But I think when we talk about affordable housing and we just need to do this or we just need to do that, and I don't mean we're saying that, but you hear those things in general. Oh, if we could just get zoning changed, or if we could just get, regulations changed, or if we could, all that might be true. But I think this just demonstrates how much is trying to get through that bottleneck, right? And it doesn't all make it because, the gap is big. Even when we were speaking of land trusts, and I really, really praise the land trusts and that Minnesota is a leader, but even in Plymouth, when we had the potential opportunity to work with the land trust, it was really hard for us to tell people, gee, you can't be part of the land value increase as time goes. You're part of the house value increase, but yet it's a solution, right? They're not all the same, but they are good solutions. So I just, again, want to thank everybody because, just, I guess with policymakers and the people that make decisions that impact all of this beyond our abilities, to just let them know when they say, oh, this community doesn't do that, or that community won't do that, or this community only cares about that. That's just not true because we see what comes through just on our agendas and what doesn't make it for approvals. And they're worthy as well in their own ways. So I'm sorry. That was a soapbox moment for me, but I'm just glad that I just believe our team at Met Council, credit goes to the staff, of course, that you're really working to fine tune this so that everything that enters that bottleneck can get out the other side so that people have homes. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Well said. Further questions or discussion on the report? Any further questions? Ms. Smith has recommended that the Metropolitan Council adopt the associated resolution. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong action. Sorry about that. And Ms. Smith has recommended that the Metropolitan Council approve the award of project-based vouchers, rent assistance, and authorize the Metro HRA Director to execute the necessary documents with the project owners for the six listed. Is there a motion to approve?
Johnson moves.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we will move on to our final business item for today, which is the new item 4, the adoption of the Livable Communities Act Affordable Life Cycle Housing Goals for 2021 to 2030. And I was just a little confused there. As I went back, it looked like there was a discrepancy between the item and the PowerPoint presentation linked to the agenda, but that could just be me. So I'm not sure who's presenting on this. Director Barajas?
Chair Lilligren, Tara Beard here. I'm prepared to present.
Thanks, Ms. Beard. Please.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope to gosh that the report and the presentation match, but it does seem like the time of year where LCA stuff and given that decennial update issue we have this year as well is just sort of like, which LCA presentation report is this again? I know it happens to me, so
Okay.
I'm sure it happens to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But this presentation is to recommend that the Council formally adopt 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals for cities choosing to re-enroll in livable communities for the 2021 to 2030 decade. Next slide, please. If I may. So we're just going to briefly remind ourselves of the requirements for Livable Communities Act participation, which is in statute formally referred to Livable Communities Act Local Housing Incentives Account. Just so that you don't get confused, it's generally shorthand referred to the Livable Communities Act, but in statute it refers specifically to the LHIA account. But it does apply to all LCA programs. Then we will review very briefly the 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals, that methodology and adoption by communities choosing to re-enroll at this time. And then I will forward a recommendation to adopt a resolution enrolling those 58 communities into the 2021-2030 decade of LCA participation. Next slide, please. So friendly reminder on the complete requirements for participation in LCA Local Housing Incentives Account. The adoption of affordable and life cycle housing goals can certainly feel like one of the most kind of procedurally intense aspects, but there are a couple of other requirements for participation. Communities also must establish a housing action plan by June 30th of the following year, and we've been working with communities on how to use the housing element of their comprehensive plan and additional information from the annual Affordable Housing Production Survey on efforts to meet affordable and life cycle housing goals to together combined be each community's housing action plan. And then communities also have to spend what we lovingly call LHOA, or affordable and life cycle housing opportunity amounts. And that is a portion of the city's budget that must go towards creating affordable and life cycle housing opportunities as a sort of skin in the game requirement in the statute for participation. Next slide, please. Today, of course, we are looking at the adoption of affordable and life cycle housing goals. They are updated every decade. They're based on the allocation of affordable housing need that is adopted in communities' comprehensive plans, which is based on our forecasted growth expected in each community and the share of that growth that we expect to be low and moderate income. 58 communities have adopted, locally adopted by resolution, 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals prior to the statutory deadline of November 15th, 2020, and are seeking re-enrollment that would be achieved with adoption of this resolution. To be clear, the opportunity to enroll in the program is available on an annual basis, but we do a sort of decennial batch re-enrollment aligned with our other kind of decennial calculations around forecasts and affordable housing need. So these 58 communities are not the only communities that can participate for the entire decade. They are simply the communities that are re-enrolling right now and will therefore be eligible to apply for grants in 2021. Next slide, please. This is a list of the 58 communities that have adopted affordable and life cycle housing goals for the 2021 decade. I'll just pause for a moment so folks can take a quick look. And if okay, we can move on to the next slide. With that, staff is recommending that the Community Development Committee recommend that the council adopt the associated resolution that will enroll and formalize the affordable and life cycle housing goals for the 58 communities for the 2021 to 2030 decade. And that's all I have, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Beard, and to your team for your work on this. And this is what confused me, Tara, was the language of the recommendation on the PowerPoint is different than the language of the recommendation on the staff report.
Oh.
And so and my guess is they effectuate the same thing, but I was just kind of comparing those, and that kind of threw me off. So I guess maybe I would turn to you for clarification, or possibly Director Barajas.
Mr. Chair, I think you're spot on. I'm going to punt that to Director Barajas to see the implications of that.
Definitely, Mr. Chair, council members, I would recommend that you use the recommended proposed action in the staff report because it involves the adoption of the resolution as well. And so we want to make that very clear that that is the action you're taking with that specific resolution number being referenced as part of your action.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And so I'll just read that out, that the Metropolitan Council approve attached resolution 2021-1, adopting Livable Communities Act affordable and life cycle housing goals for 2021 to 2030 that have been locally adopted by communities participating in the Livable Communities Act program for 2021 to 2030. Great, so that's the recommendation being discussed. Any questions or comments on the report?
Mr. Chair?
Sure, Councilmember Lindstrom, then Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks. Just quickly on that number, the 58, is that trending upwards or downwards?
Ms. Beard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was some cutting out, Councilmember Lindstrom, but I think I got the gist of your question, so I'll go ahead and answer. But if I don't capture everything you asked, please let me know. It is trending downward. As of 2020, we had 97 participants. So 58 is quite a downward cycle. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One reason I believe is because of the COVID pandemic, we've simply had some communities that have gotten so kind of backed up on business and had kind of items that they, had a delay in council meetings and opportunities to adopt the life cycle housing goals by November 15th. I've spoken with a number of those communities and they do intend to re-enroll, but they didn't have any projects in the pipeline for 2021. So there was sort of no negative consequence on their behalf to hold off and make sure they adopt those goals by November 15th of 2021, which would therefore enroll them for 2022 through 2030. So I think for some communities, it was simply an administrative burden that, given other situations this year, proved too much to get those goals adopted by November 15th. I think another issue is that some communities were not able to get their comprehensive plan authorized to be put into effect by council by the end of 2020, and that was also a requirement to be eligible for Livable Communities Act funds. So there are, again, a handful of communities that I think will get their plans completed in 2021 and are likely to re-enroll at that time. Finally, I do think we have some communities that aren't sure what Livable Communities Act participation is worth to them. And so we're planning to do a lot of work making sure that the program feels inclusive and accessible, and the value of it is evident to all communities, because all communities are putting money into the program through their property tax levies. And so we want to make sure that we're continuously looking at how to make the programs feel accessible to all so that we can increase participation. So in short, I fully expect another couple dozen communities that are just a little bit behind but intended to re-enroll to join on in 2021. And then the folks that don't will be definitely making individual phone calls too, and probably involving you all in that as well to make sure that we're making the program accessible to all.
Mr. Chair?
Please, Councilmember Johnson. I was having trouble unmuting. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstrom asked my question, but I'll have a follow-up question as well. So, Tara, do we track over the years, well, I know we track who the participants are for livable communities. Do we track how often they received funding and how much over any time period, or perhaps those communities that don't receive funding but have applied? I mean, I just really, to your last point, we've talked about this in our housing work group to a degree, but, you know, trying to figure out too, those ones that are trying to get funded, are they getting funded? Aren't they getting funded? Because not, again, the playing field, when I was on my soapbox earlier, it's not all equal out there in effort and ability to get things done, but it doesn't mean that the will isn't there. Sometimes you have the opposite. You have all the resources and there's no will, right? So I'd like to figure that out. And I know you're looking at that. I know you're keeping an eye on that, and I really can appreciate that COVID and comp plans and things are holding communities back a bit this year. So it'll be interesting to see who comes on the next year or two. But I really do still want to kind of crack that nut because, you know, I've got cities that I don't know, you know, exactly why or why not they're doing what they're doing, but maybe again, they just don't feel like they'd ever really have a shot at receiving funding. So I just want to explore that more as we keep going forward on this program.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further questions or discussion on the report?
Councilmember Chambliss, I would ditto what Judy said. I'd be interested in exploring the statistics more, looking at ways that we understand where the opportunities are and where they're not being taken advantage of. Either maybe they don't know, maybe the communities don't know what the process is, but they would like to see these services. Maybe there needs to be education around that, but a little bit more time on how to increase access would be great.
Thank you, Councilmember. I turned my camera out just because my WebEx is really choppy and it's a little smoother when my camera's off. So thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on this?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy.
Ms. Beard.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to address those comments, if that would be okay. I just want to express how much I appreciate and share those sentiments. I'm super excited to have put an offer, and I'm awaiting the background check to be completed for a new planner on LCA, whose main focus will be helping us measure and kind of corral some pretty unwieldy data. I have done some analysis of these issues kind of in more specific ways for particular conversations here and there, but kind of having a better annual report card and accessible data are things that are on my agenda, and I'm really excited to have a staff person who can help, because right now we have a lot of great data that we aren't using to tell very many stories. So I just wanted to acknowledge those comments and share my intention to do that.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Beard. We're all looking forward to the fruits of that work. Any further discussion, questions on the report? Otherwise, Ms. Beard has proposed the action as printed on the staff report linked to this item on the agenda, that we approve the life cycle housing goals for 2021 to 2030. And is there a motion to approve?
Chambliss makes a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there
Wolf
a second?
seconds.
All right. Thanks, Councilmember Wolf. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we will move on to our information item, which was carried over from last year. Director Barajas was kind enough to give us a bit of a reprieve after our 3-hour marathon meeting at the end of last year. And so now we're bringing this item forward at the first meeting in 2021. So it is the 2021 work planning for housing strategies, and that will be presented by Director Barajas. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, council members. And I certainly empathize with you and really appreciate all of your time and efforts in our last several meetings of 2020 as we were trying to help communities get their plans authorized and put a lot of stuff on your agendas to get that moved through. So I really appreciate your time, but I'm happy to be in front of you today to talk about our work planning for 2021, and we'll have a couple of discussions today. So just for the record, I'm Lisa Barajas, the Community Development Director, and Greg, if we could move to the next slide, that would be great. So today I'm just going to give a really brief refresh on the housing goal that's part of your strategic plan, an update on the strategies that are part of that plan so far, and then hopefully have a short discussion with you on prioritizing those specific strategies within the strategic plan. Next slide, please. So today, really just looking for your feedback on those housing strategies. Later this month, we'll have some further discussion of the committee work plan, and you've given us already some ideas about things that you're interested in hearing about, updates as you were discussing with Terry Smith's presentation on some of those wraparound services and how they're working, and some other items as well that we hear from you in other work and in some of your council discussions. But as part of our overall division work planning process, we generally start with the things that are required by us, required by federal or state statutes for us to do within our division. And then we take additional direction from Thrive, MSP 2040, and other adopted documents like the Housing Policy Plan on projects and work that we should be doing to really shape our staff and division work plans. And then we look for additional prioritization and discussion from you. So whether it's in the strategic plan or through other discussions that we have to address emerging issues throughout the year that maybe weren't anticipated in any of our other adopted documents. Next slide, please. I'm getting a little bit of feedback from somebody or somebody not muted. Excuse me. Okay, thank you.
I don't think Tara's muted. Yeah, Tara's not muted. I don't know if there are others.
There we go. Looks like she's muted now. Thank you.
Great.
So just a really brief refresh that in the strategic plan that your housing goal states that the council's goal is to become a region with a broader housing spectrum where all people can thrive. And just for your reference, I included the objectives that were in that plan related to the regional planning objectives, as well as the investment and operations objectives. But today I'm really going to focus on the strategies that help meet those objectives because those are the items that build our work plan. Next slide, please. So for ease, and you've seen this in the posted staff report on this item as well, I've organized the strategies according to how we do our work. So some of those strategies are organized in the category of regular work, so stuff that we already do as part of our regular jobs, whether that's providing technical assistance to local governments, participating in conversations, things that are already part of a staff member's work and job description are things that fall into this bucket of regular work. Annual budget is a category that relates to some of the decision making that you as policymakers are responsible for. So increasing the amount of funding within the LHIA account, for example, would be an item that would fall under an annual budget decision. So not necessarily something that's part of staff work plans or committee work plans, but part of your regular decision making processes. And then finally, the special projects and initiatives are exactly what as they're listed. They're things that we aren't already doing, or things that require us to shift some direction or to start something that we haven't done before, to do some exploration, or to do some additional investigation, or to start something new altogether. So today we're going to be focusing on those items. You can, but I will go through each of these in the coming slides. Next slide, please. So just this report also serves as a bit of an update of the work we've done so far related to those strategies. I did give an update at a council meeting or a committee of the whole. Now I don't even remember, COVID time blurs all the time together, but I believe when there wasn't snow on the ground, so sometime in late summer or early fall, when we revisited all of the strategies within your strategic plan and gave very high level updates across all four of those goals. But today a little bit more detail, just on a report out of what we've accomplished so far. So on these strategies, on the annual budget strategies, you just took recommended action on the first one. We moved those $1 million into our LHIA account. And as you saw, many of those projects are serving those populations, supportive housing for families experiencing homelessness or about to experience homelessness, with supportive services wrapped around them as well. And in addition, that increase in LHIA funding was part of your budget decision in 2020, and certainly awards related there as well. Next slide, please. On regular work strategies, you can see on here we have a number of strategies related to technical assistance, participating and convening in workshops, maintaining and improving our data infrastructure related to housing. All of those items are ongoing items of pieces that our staff continue to do and continue to work on. Obviously, workshops were a bit of a tough item in 2019. Most of our workshops are really focused on livable communities programs in 2019, but going forward, I'm sure there will be additional items that our staff will be working toward, providing supports to local governments that support them in moving forward a number of different local strategies to promote affordable housing within their communities. The top item related to a more nuanced analysis and council actions that is more context appropriate within communities and neighborhoods is something that is continues to be ongoing discussion among staff, and really related to the work that our research team has brought to you around rethinking areas of concentrated poverty and how we do that work. So this is underway and continues to be embedded in our work, and we'll be daylighting more of that in the coming year as we're doing that work. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm doing two screens here, so I get my notes caught up. So on special projects and initiatives, we had these items listed. We had actually a number of special projects and initiatives, and I wanted to start with the one that was complete, was the review of our livable communities programs to ensure alignment with the key objectives. And as Tara and her team have frequently referenced throughout the year of exploration was really this initiative and was a very large undertaking. And while it was a lot of work and we're listing it as complete, it really is livable communities programs, as you all are aware. We continually are reviewing and refining and ensuring that we're having the impact that we're intending to have within that. I think this was the kind of the big effort year, but suffice it to say that we're not maybe done, but have done a huge amount of work this year, and then we'll be working to fine tune and adjust over the coming years. Underway are these other 4 initiatives that we continue to look at, and we'll be reporting to you particularly on items like the housing choice vouchers. Number 2, this research project around residential preferences, and as you have heard us, or as Terry Smith has presented to you on other funding opportunities through HUD and other partners to assist with rent assistance, assist households with rent assistance, and other sorts of programs like the Homework Starts with Home program. You've heard about those throughout the calendar year of 2020, and those applications are submitted or are about to be submitted, and partnerships are underway. And so certainly if we do get awarded, we will be coming back to you with more items for some of those federal programs, providing updates on that and really digging into that work. And certainly reporting back to you on how the in-place strategies are working as we get more time and experience with our partnerships underway. Next slide, please. So that leaves us with the 5 items that are left under the special projects and initiatives that we have not started yet. And at first I was like, wow, that seems like a lot. But then I look back at all the things that we have done in just 1 year, and I'm really impressed, so impressed with our team and how much that we have accomplished so far. And especially given the circumstances in which we were working, how quickly our team pivoted to really continue to move these strategies forward and find new and different ways to promote the overall goal that is identified in your strategic plan. But on these 5 items is where I'd really like your help on prioritizing them. We think we can get most of these items started this year, but as we know, when we're planning for work at the beginning of the year, we don't always know what's going to happen even 3 months into the year and how much it might throw things off course. So what I'm really looking for from you today is kind of a relative importance check. If we were to only work on one of these items or accomplish one of these items this year, which ones should we focus on? And I do want to note, I'm sorry, that number 5 in here is in gray for a reason, because it actually isn't something that in community development that we would be focused on, but something that Meredith Vedas, prior to her reassignment with the governor's office, was really spearheading this effort. And I really think that should be left with the regional administration, because it is more employer based and is really in their realm. But I did want to put it here for the sake of transparency that it is one of the items. But I just wanted to note that. But out of the first 4 items, I really would appreciate your input, feedback on which items, if we could only do one this year, which item we should focus on.
Thank you, Director Barajas, and I'm happy to open the floor to committee members to respond to your questions. One of the things that may help us as we go forward is to better understand the different level of staff time and capacity that needs to get directed to these. I think open discussion on what our priorities is order. So committee members on these on prioritizing the remaining special projects and initiatives.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa, is there a way, I'm really interested in exploring first-time homebuyer programs through the Housing Choice Voucher Program. I've been kind of encouraging and urging that one however we can. Is there a way, though, where we can focus it on closing the horrific gap that we have between white households that own property and BIPOC households? You know, we're at the bottom of the list across the nation. We have the worst disparities there are, and yet I know it's fair housing, but that's really where, you know, if there's any way to, you know, to our other goals, you know, equitable opportunities, you know, working to, you know, end disparities, ending racism in our housing system, in all systems, right? I'm just really curious about, can we tailor something or focus that on BIPOC households, or within BIPOC disaggregated data, you know, where the greatest gaps are?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I believe Terry is, I think, still on this meeting, but I think that she can speak to this a little bit more better than I can. But our Housing Choice Voucher holders, a large portion of our holders are households of color already, more than what is representative of the region. But maybe, Terry, you might be able to speak to that a bit more intelligently than I can.
Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, the eligibility criteria is based on income level of Housing Choice Voucher holders. 60% of the families we serve are households of color. And part of what the goal is for this year, what was on our work plan for 2020, which we didn't get to as Lisa indicated, but part of it is to really dig in and see how we want to, if number one, we want to establish a homeownership program for voucher holders, but then secondly, what are the criteria and the eligibility criteria? And I'm just pulled out my notes from a couple of meetings I've had on this, and I think it's, again, based on income, but I think your question is a good one, and I don't think I have an answer today, but one I think we should dig into and see if there's a way we could incorporate that into the eligibility criteria. So noted that I will add that to my list of questions as we explore further.
Thanks, Terry. And Councilmember Johnson had to step away, it looks like, and so we can come back if she has a follow-up question, but further questions and comments, Councilmember Vento.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I could make a strong argument for all four of these, and maybe even five, being important initiatives for us in 2021. But as I look at them, I lean toward number 2 and number 4, because I think that they have the potential to lay the groundwork for us to more effectively move toward number 1 and number 3. I think if we explore a housing choice indicator tool that really helps identify the needs in specific communities in the region, it will help us kind of leverage the whole conversation. And as well, I think number 4 is kind of a, gee, what have we got available? And where is it available? And to the extent that it fits in with what we learn with the indicator tool, can we work with those communities where that council-owned land is located and move forward? So I kind of tend to lead toward number 2 and number 4, because I think that, as I said, kind of creates a ramp for number 1 and number 3.
Chair Lilligren.
Please, Councilmember Chambliss.
Okay, thank you. I agree with Councilmember Vento's suggestions of prioritizing number 2 and number 4. I think 1 and 3 can also be done, but I think, the work that we need to do is so expansive. These priorities are really critical to have us focus on making a dent in our policy and reducing housing disparities. I also, the other thing, I wanted to mention about the disaggregated data, which is very important to number 2's goals. The research team is working on disaggregating that data. A council member, Atlas Ingrid-Britson, and I have been, and other council members have been asking for that. And she and I have been working with the team to understand how that data is disaggregated. And I'm hoping that can help inform not only our staff and council members, but organizations in the region. So I'm really excited about the impact that having disaggregated data is going to have in terms of identifying where our disparities are, and how we might address them, and not just in terms of representativeness, but in terms of income, in terms of home ownership, in terms of education, and some of those other factors that are going to be critical for us as policymakers.
Thank you, Councilmember. Committee members, further comments? And please just speak up. I can't see all of you all at once.
Wendy here.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. And then Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would advocate against number 1. Just looking at kind of the history, the region was involved in a lot of getting first-time home buyers in at the bottom of the market right before the last big downturn in the housing market, and we're seeing some of the same upheavals coming in the market now, where rents are actually going down, but housing prices are going up really fast. There's a real shortage of first-time home buyer, like lower valued homes. In my neighborhood, it's been just a bidding war when a house does come on the market, and they've been going for 10% over the asking price in a matter of days. And when that happened back in the mid 2000s, there were some people who really leveraged themselves to get into housing and then found themselves deeply underwater when the market changed. And so I'm concerned that that we would be setting people up for failure if we're trying to have them use their vouchers to get into housing that could be overpriced for now and drop in value later, especially since we're not done with all of this COVID business and what's going to happen with where people work, how people work, housing. Things are very risky right now in the housing world, and I don't want to set people up for failure and have them lose their homes and not be able to even try for many years because they've defaulted on a mortgage.
Thank you, Council Member. And then, was it Council Member Lindstrom? I thought somebody was requesting the floor. Was it you, Council Member Lee?
Yeah, it was me. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, and then Council Member Lindstrom. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Councilmember Vento. I really like number 4, number 2, although I would like to also learn more about number 5. It sounds interesting and intriguing, but I think it would depend on what that would look like both in the private sector and the public sector. But I agree that with number 4, we have such an important asset in land that we can leverage to help meet that goal. But I think number 2 would be more important to me because we have to get buy-in in all the region and for the sake of equity, not just in terms of general equity, but geographic equity. We should look at how we can uplift everyone who needs housing throughout the whole region. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Question for Lisa. I was reviewing our strategic plan earlier today, and one of the things that stood out is the development of a toolkit for local governments, specifically around unsheltered homelessness. And I'm wondering, is that part of our ongoing work? Are we still planning on doing that? Thoughts on that? You know, a toolkit that might have model ordinances on inclusionary zoning or upzoning or whatever you might include in that. Is that still part of the plan?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom, yep. The toolkit was listed as one of the objectives, so maybe a bit of a misnomer as an objective, but yes, that would be something that would fall under our ongoing technical assistance that we provide model ordinances, convene workshops, and provide other sorts of kind of examples or best practices from around the region of like just what other local governments are doing that has found to be successful. That's certainly something that is part of our ongoing work and part of that, not necessarily a special project or initiative.
Although if I might, Mr. Chair, something like that would fit in nicely with number 2 with the housing choice indicator tool to provide more specific recommendations. If we're creating a toolkit with recommendations, there'd be a nice tie in there.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom, I totally agree.
Great. Thank you. Committee members, other comments? So I'll jump in here. And so number 1 kind of confuses me now, and I'm trying to remember why we tied that so specifically to our housing choice voucher program. And it seems like I think maybe Ms. Smith or somebody discussed a possibility of doing that, and I share some of Councilmember Wolf's concerns, but also we're doing a lot through our HRA right now, and so to me it seems like maybe this isn't the year to explore first-time home buyer program through the housing choice voucher program. Although I think, to Councilmember Johnson's point, addressing the regional disparities in home ownership is something that we need to be doing. I'm just not sure I feel it's really there. And then this kind of builds on what Councilmember Lindstrom was just saying, and I think I kind of fall into the 2 and 4 camp, but in the where it mentions in number 2 recommendations about housing in specific communities, I'm trying to think what specific communities and if would it benefit, benefit us to focus on or to name specific communities. One of them are housing opportunities for people with disabilities, for example, which is something that we don't talk about a lot. And so housing recommendations about housing in specific communities in the region seems really wide open. And I don't know if it's sort of we all have an understanding of the communities that we need or that we mean, or if it would benefit us to start naming them. People experiencing unsheltered homelessness, people with disabilities, and but around that, I fall sort of into the 2 and 4 camp.
Mr. Chair, actually, perhaps I can give you a little bit of background on the Housing Choice Voucher Program, just as a refresher of how we got there. I know Councilmember Musay, who wasn't here today, wasn't able to attend today, was familiar with a program that Mankato, I believe Mankato Housing Authority had started with the Housing Choice Voucher to help tenants move from rent assistance into home ownership through that program. And actually Meredith Vedas, prior to her reassignment, also had noted, because a close personal friend of hers works in that authority, and put us in touch with them as well. So it's an opportunity that's allowable under the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and we certainly have households that actually graduate out of rent assistance and are no longer in need of housing assistance. And so that might be a good transitional step for them. So that was just the background at the time when we were discussing that strategy. And then I would maybe ask Tara if she wanted to speak a bit about the Housing Choice Indicator tool and what I know we've been batting that one around for several years now, and maybe she can give a little bit of background on what we were thinking.
Yeah, please. Ms. Beard.
Absolutely, and you'll catch me. I've moved the laptop into the kitchen, which is why you heard me banging pots and pans earlier. So I apologize again for that. Thank you. Yes. So the housing inventory tool, is kind of something that Joel Hudding, the manager of research, and I have kind of back and forth talked about for years as sort of a deeper dive into what we kind of do with the allocation of affordable housing need, and looking at more than just really high level indicators of sort of like, well, you have this much affordable housing, and that plays a role in what type of affordable housing, maybe you should accept a share of future need for, really paying a lot more attention to the concept of housing choice and kind of markets and trade-offs. So we talk a lot about, just because sort of your share of the allocation of need for maybe 30% and below is X, does that align with other kind of demand and need and geographic kind of alignment with where that need is best met? And so when Lisa talks about it being kind of connected to the geographic disparity work that that research is doing as well, that would play a role as well. And so it's just being able to be more nuanced about our funding decisions within the local Livable Communities Act programs and our technical assistance for communities about what type of housing do they need to round out their ability to be resilient and provide access to choice in a way that is shared across the region. I hope that's helpful, but I'm happy to keep taking questions.
Yeah, very helpful. Any questions from committee members?
Mr. Chair, on that piece.
Yep, Councilmember Johnson.
And when we, and I appreciate, Mr. Chair, specific communities, I was thinking geographic communities, but you were talking about communities of people. So is it communities of people then? Is that what we're saying in that sentence?
That's kind of what I was asking. Yeah. What do we mean by specific community? It almost seems coded. Is it geographically specific or sort of types of communities? Yeah.
Thank you for following up and clarifying. Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Johnson, I think what you're noticing is that we haven't scoped it out yet. that I think part of the work would be, okay, we know that we'd like to put a finer point on kind of what types of housing choices are needed in different areas and use that to be more specific in our technical assistance and in our funding recommendations. But exactly what that looks like is limited to the data we have available, to conversations with our partners and with you all to figure out what the scope of that work is. And is it more appropriate to look at it in terms of like travel sheds or city boundaries or, and frankly, we just don't have an answer for that yet. Scoping that out would be part of the initial work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tara. That really helps me a lot because I'm thinking housing choice vouchers. I'm thinking special communities or specific communities. So that really clarifies it greatly for me. And so, while I indicated support for one, I do dig number two a lot for the reason I think we're trying to align opportunities and needs for future economic growth for people, which is, ultimately what I think we should be working for, opportunity and equity for everybody. And I think that it'd be cool, maybe there is such a thing in the transportation side of things, but it's the same sort of thing. Like, how do you get transportation and transit where it aligns with what people need, and get it in the places that have the greatest impact for growth and opportunity and equity. So I do appreciate that clarification for me. And as far as the first one, I'll just put a plug in here. I appreciate the warnings greatly on the first-time homebuyer program, but I do really want to just keep it on the radar for people that, first of all, we wouldn't be working in isolation. There'd have to be partners with us that have great experience in this and, educate and prep and workshop and work on finances and credit scores and get them prepared to make the offer. And in whatever environment, be that buyer that's really right for the time, for the future, for generational wealth building. I mean, that's the goal. So clearly, markets change and there can be pitfalls for everybody, but I think the goal is worthy in that one. And then too, as we, because I've been talking with staff about this for a good long while, when somebody does move off of the voucher program, it opens up another unit for somebody who's waiting. So it's keeping that pipeline moving, essentially. And the only last thing, Mr. Chair, if I could, and maybe, sorry, it is my birthday and I have kids who are COVID safe dropping food off at my front door tonight because, so I'm sorry if I missed this.
Happy birthday, Councilman.
Thank you. I get to spend it with you guys, which is the best group ever. And then I know there were some cautions, maybe from Councilmember Wolf, or maybe it was Councilmember Barber, and maybe it was staff. The covenants that are on some of our council-owned land, or maybe a lot of our council-owned land, because of the funds that come through to purchase the land or that tie up the land and the titles. So I'm really okay with number 4, but I also want to know, well, what percentage of our land is even available as an option for this? Because that too might be where you really, once you figure out if the land is even available, which I don't know how easy that is to do, but then you also want to probably bring in other partners because we're not all experts in everything by ourselves, right? So I'd be just curious if somebody has a number 2 on number 4, number as well on number 4, on what percentage of acreage and land and zoning and all the stuff that even make it a possibility for us. And the only reason I asked that is because at the City of Plymouth, we did a complete inventory of all of the land that we owned, thinking we'd have land to develop for housing. And it really turned out that it wasn't as much as we thought there was going to be, but it's still opportunity.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, the council does own a lot of land, but you're right, not all of it is available. We own a lot of land around our wastewater treatment plants for a reason, because we don't want houses there. So there's some of that land just simply won't be available. That being said, we do own quite a bit of land that is sort of slivers or other pieces that could be utilized for others to do a development project, where that might just round out, or I should say square out their property. So like these strategies on note, these are all exploration, because we don't know all your answers yet. We don't know, how a housing choice voucher or home ownership program would work yet. We don't know how much land we have yet. So there's a lot of initial exploration that we have to do and some math to even decide, is this worth, as a council, as policymakers, is this project worth pursuing further?
Great, thanks. And I see Councilmember Vento requesting for, but just on this really briefly, I think to Tara's point earlier about scoping that work out, I mean, is that at the end of the day, do we want some evaluative sort of tool, waterfall that, if this happened to this piece of property, it would be, more available for housing or could be made available for housing? I think it's an intriguing conversation. Councilmember Vento.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to note that as it relates to number one, I really appreciate what Councilmember Wolf advised in terms of a caution about number one, but that to the extent that we can explore it and think through strategies and partnerships, it seems like it still wouldn't hurt. Time is of the essence, and we may find that there are things that we can do now to prepare for the possibility of a program like this down the road. And I'm thinking particularly of some conversations with the Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity and the Realtors Association and various groups that might be able to advise us and with whom we might be able to partner on this. So just a thought as to not completely taking it off the radar, but following the caution that Councilmember Wolf notes.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on this? Director Barajas, are you kind of getting what you need out of this conversation?
Absolutely. This has been really helpful, Mr. Chair. And like I had noted in the beginning, we feel like we can get started on all of these things, but not knowing what's going to happen this year, this helps us kind of gauge like, okay, if we get something crazy, like, I don't know, a global pandemic and it throws us off course, which one should we focus on? That helps us to really build that for us, and also helps us to hear from you as well about what you would prefer to see if we could only do one. Now, we do think that we can get everything started this year, at least started, and we'll be coming to you later this month with our baseline work plan for the year as well, and getting your feedback and input on that and starting to put some shape around the topics. And then again in February to finalize that with some timing as we build up our whole division work plan. There's a lot of interdependencies in all of our work teams as well, and other things that we're required to do that get in the way of us doing the things we want to do, as is life. But those are things that you'll be seeing from us in the coming weeks here as we shape up our 2021 work plan. So thank you so much for your input. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa, to you and your team. This was a really useful conversation for us as well. And I should have noted, Councilmember Atlas Ingerbritsen texted me early in this meeting. She had a family situation and was unable to join us sort of last minute. Any other items from committee members? Anything? Yeah, Councilmember Vento.
Councilmember Vento thinks that we should conclude with a song for Councilmember Johnson. Just, I don't know.
All right, people, unmute. I gotta make sure people.
Oh, are you serious?
Are you gonna lead us, Councilmember Vento?
Sure. Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
dear
Councilmember Johnson.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, my goodness.
Aww.
That was really special. Thanks,
You guys, I'm not gonna lie. That meant a lot. I have been like so cooped up. It's just, I appreciate that. So you all sound like a choir of angels. Thank you.
Happy
Great
birthday.
suggestion, Councilmember Vento. Happy birthday, Jim. All right. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Happy New Year.
Stay
Have a good
healthy.
week.
Happy